All right.
This meeting is being recorded.
And that familiar double sound of this meeting is being recorded tells you that you are watching or listening to another edition of Forward Maryland. From an undisclosed autumnal location, I'm Bill Woodcock.
And I'm Steve Hunt. And as the bus boys once said in 48 Hours, the boys are back in town.
Yeah, it's been a little while, and there's been some things going on. I mean, I know you've had some drama and trauma in your world to deal with. How's everything working out?
Everything is working out fine and everything's doing okay. First of all, Bill, thank you for holding it down for not one but two shows. And I love the shows, by the way. If anybody hasn't listened to them, they actually tie well into each other with the situation in Cecil County with the write-in candidate, but then also the next week with Lynn Fox, we're talking about ranked choice voting. I think they kind of mesh together well. So nice topics to put back to back. So really appreciate that, Bill. But no, things are well. Week one, I believe, was a baseball tournament. I can't remember what week one was. Week two was my son, who plays junior varsity football and is playing football tackle version for the first time in his life. Broke his leg. His lower leg broke both bones, actually. So he got his money's worth. Total freak incident situation where he was down and a guy falls down, his helmet slams down on his leg. It just something I don't think I've seen playing or watching football, but doing much better. Major shout out to the folks at Johns Hopkins up in Baltimore. The surgeon, we call her Dr. H. She calls herself Dr. H because her last name most people butcher, but Dr. H, you're probably not listening, but if anybody ever gets to her, you were awesome. She did the surgery. Took 3 hours, did the whole titanium rod. So he will now set off every metal detector for the rest of his life. And, but in 3 to 5 months, if all goes well, he will be on a baseball diamond playing for the high school team. So no, it's going good. So you're right. It was drama. And obviously for the leg, it was trauma, but he's doing well. He's actually walking, in the pre-show, I was telling you, Bill, when I broke my leg as a kid, I was in a cast for 12 weeks and I wasn't walking.
Yeah.
Maybe the last couple and a half casts, I could take a few, but he's walking like he sprained his ankle or something, not broken leg, major surgery. So he's good. So thank you, Bill.
Well, that's awesome.
How's your world?
Yeah, I don't like to share, sometimes when people, I shared that there were some things,
Yep.
people, of course, jump to conclusions. But thank you for sharing all of that, Steve. And my God, certainly happy to hear that Jason is doing much better. And that's awesome prognosis in terms of recovery. And I can remember injuries taking much longer to heal up to back in our day. But technology is much better, medicine is much better, and it's kind of scary to think of, walking around, just a few weeks after a broken leg. I could never think of doing that.
Yeah, by the way, aside political note, the worst part of the entire experience was the ambulance ride. And the worst part of that was as soon as we got off of I-95, you know Hopkins and the way to Hopkins from Howard County. Once we got off I-95, the roads, man, the bumps with a guy with a broken leg. We need to get Brandon Scott on here to talk about Baltimore streets, man, because I didn't think my kid was going to make it, man.
Brandon Scott's got a lot of things to worry about. And I mean, in all fairness, those streets are maybe important to us, but holy smoky. All of the things he's got to worry about. But it doesn't seem to keep him away from a camera, though. He is surely on choice of fill-in, choice of local news station here. Anyway, we could talk for a long time about Baltimore City, but while I'm going through, I feel like I have cottage cheese stuffed in my nose today. Steve, have you ever had cottage cheese in your nose?
I've never had that. I don't even want to conjure up a mental image of
Yeah,
that.
I'm pretty sure I do. I'm pretty sure I do have some cottage cheese in my nose. I don't like cottage cheese, but it's making me sound a little bit nasal and
Mm.
and just like a little bit like this. And I'm not liking it, but maybe we'll get through it as the podcast goes on. So, Steve, there's a lot of things happening, and you've come back at a very opportune time because it is prime time, crunch time, near time for the 2022 elections. I know I cast my vote in my handy dandy Howard County drop box last weekend. I don't know where you are in the world of actually voting, but you know, Maryland elections are more or less fait accompli. We'll preview and give our predictions, but I don't think in a later podcast. But I don't think there's going to be any shocks or surprises, at least amongst the statewide elections. But there are some very interesting elections close to us, and at least also elsewhere on the East Coast. And so the first place I want to talk about is the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which I have been spent last weekend over in Delaware and spending some time in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Delaware later on today. And just my friends here and just my experiences and watching the television, this Senate race between Dr. Oz and John Fetterman is off the hook. As you have said, we need something like that in Maryland. Um, Fetterman keeps trolling Oz about not living in the state, not having Pennsylvanians' values. Much more recently, he's been talking. He's been getting back to more grassroots commercials and ads. Talking about abortion, voting rights. More jobs, more core democratic issues. Where Oz is labeling Fetterman as a crazy Bernie Sanders following whack job who also happens to be an elitist. Of course, the man's got a big old, I don't even know what you call it. I guess it's a goatee, but a goatee without the mustache is called something else. But he's got one of these big things. The dude's 6'8" and he wears Carhartts all the time. Not sure how he follows as an elitist. But whatever Oz is doing is seeming to be working because the race is tightening up. I mean, this last week, the polls are still showing a Fetterman lead, but within the margin for error. Steve, I know you've been looking at this for some time. What are your observations on a Senate seat that could very likely flip from Republican to Democrat?
Yeah, Bill, it's an interesting race in that, to your point, Fetterman was cruising. The abortion issue after the Dobbs decision came out, and obviously that got a lot of Dems energized. He is an interesting character, and you really have two candidates that are, I'll say, flawed. I hate to use that word in talking about Fetterman because he has a legitimate health issue, but I just wonder if he had not had that stroke and he was out on the campaign trail full force as he was in the spring, what this race might have looked like, because Oz and his friends, because there's a whole lot of dark money being poured into the state of Pennsylvania on the airways with just commercial after commercial about crime and immigration and not even really the economy. It's a lot of I call it fear mongering, and that's really I mean, the race I think was going to tighten up a little bit because Pennsylvania is truly a swing state. I don't think Fetterman was ever going to win by 10, because Oz, for all the flaws and the fact that I don't think he's qualified to be a United States senator, he's not a Mastriano. He's not radioactive politically like a Mastriano, or here in Maryland, a Dan Cox. So it was going to tighten up. But I think it's been accelerated by, the money that's been poured in. Oz is running, just finding an issue and just running with it. And the fact that Fetterman's response has not been as strong as I think it could have been if his health were up to it. I think that debate is going to be huge that's coming up. I think that if Fetterman can stand tall, pardon the pun, because you're right, the guy's 6'8". But if he stands tall in the debate, I think Fetterman can close the deal. I think that's the big thing. People want to see him on stage in a debate and see if health-wise he can take it. I think Biden had the same issue in 2020. Could you stand in there for an hour and a half or whatever it was? I think that's going to be key. If Fetterman has a not bad night, I think he's going to win. I think everything points to Fetterman because Oz is Oz. It's going to be close, but that's what I'm looking at, Bill. I think it's if the debate goes well, or quite frankly not horrible for Fetterman, I think that salts it away. I think that's the big question mark on John Fetterman right now. And it's also nationalized. One of the few places Joe Biden can actually go because it's next door to his home state of Delaware, and he is from Scranton. I don't know if you saw it the other day that Biden was in PA, and Fetterman actually wore a suit. This just
Well,
in.
Biden was in PA, but even when Biden was in Hagerstown the other week, I mean, there's relevance there to Pennsylvania because that is certainly close enough, and people do commute between states. Hey, I'm less cottage cheesy now. Look at this. But and I think he's going at least one more time back to Pennsylvania. But you know, the other observation I'll make, and this gets to a latter topic after later on in today's show, is the Trump coattails, because Trump likes Oz, and the Trump candidates do excellent in the primaries, but so far, and thank God, we don't have very many of these acolytes of Trump's winning statewide office. So one would have to wonder if on election day, a lot of Pennsylvanians don't show up who just go, no, man, and just don't vote for Oz and vote for Fetterman, or whether there's finally a breakthrough and you see some of this, silent 4 or 5% of the, Republicans who wind up voting for Trump, who don't show up in like the national polls or even state polls. And if these things, and if this won't throw the election in Fetterman's favor, we keep the media, and I think, the political class keeps waiting to see that happening. It hasn't happened yet. And I guess, will this be the time that it happens? You look at elsewhere, and, you look at some other states, and I don't want to diverge too far from PA, but like in Wisconsin, Rob Johnson should, by all accounts, be losing. He's a turd, but he's winning, and he's projected to win. 538 has his margin is bigger than Fetterman's margin in PA right now. And then you look at some of these other states, where the race in Nevada looks like that's likely to flip away. So I would like to think that the fine people of the Commonwealth would not vote for a carpetbagging, semi-nutty TV doctor, but they might.
Yeah, well, they voted for a TV entertainment failed businessman for president, so all bets are off at this point.
True.
We're in a new world. We're in a new world, man.
So down south, we have another very interesting Senate race. And this is like heads versus tails. This is like spy versus spy. These are two very diametrically opposed individuals. So you have the incumbent Democratic Senator, Raphael Warnock, pastor, very upstanding, moral gentleman, served in this, he won the special election, beating Kelly Loeffler 2 years ago, and served in the Senate very well, is a passionate speaker, certainly a man of very high moral character. And then we have Herschel Walker. he of the, the former New Jersey General, Minnesota Viking, Dallas Cowboy. Can't remember who else Herschel played for in his career, but I mentioned the New Jersey Generals. He was signed out of Georgia by Donald Trump, who was then the owner of that USFL team, and has had a 40-year love affair with Donald Trump ever since then. I'm probably pretty sure Herschel's still on the payroll for Trump somewhere. And of course, he's Trump endorsed. He was he won the Republican nomination by a mile, but he's had lots and lots of problems. Most notably, these checks that he wrote for former girlfriends to have abortions. Our man Herschel's got problems, yet it's still possible that he could win. Of course, then you also look at Georgia and you look at Stacey Abrams versus Brian Kemp, and Brian Kemp is polling ahead of Stacey Abrams by about 5 to 7 points. I don't know enough about Georgia state politics, Steve, but I do know right and wrong. And what does it say about an electorate where, you have folks who supposedly are, a more conservative state, maybe people of faith, and there's a damn minister who's the U.S. senator. And instead, these fine Americans are going to go vote for a guy who underwrote abortions for his girlfriends.
I got 4 words for you, Bill. They do not care. And I think that Dana Loesch, whoever that commentator is that is basically the NRA's mouthpiece, I think she said it. She said the quiet part out loud. It might have been the obvious part when she said, I don't care. We don't care. We want power. We want to run the show. And if this is the way we get there, fine. And I think that you and I follow this stuff, so it's been pretty obvious to us. Hopefully it's obvious to the rest of the world. And I'm just going to say it straight up. The Republican Party does not care about this country. They want power, period, hard stop. Because Herschel Walker, strip away all the drama, okay? Just let's put that aside for a minute because there's a whole lot of it. We can have a whole show on it. He is eminently unqualified to be a United States Senator. If you did a blind taste test and put Raphael Warnock's resume with no name, face, or anything, or party affiliation, and Herschel Walker's, there's no way that any voter in their right mind would say, I take Herschel. I mean, I've been a hiring manager for most of my career. You've hired people. Have you ever said, and this is the thing that irritates me about debate coverage, when they say, well, Herschel had a good night because he didn't totally screw up. He had a low bar and he crossed it. Bill, have you ever had 3 candidates for a job and said, I'm going to hire the least qualified candidate that gave the worst resume because they didn't suck as bad as I thought they were going to suck?
No.
Thank you. That is today's Republican Party. I mean, yes, we had fun 10 years ago with the Christine O'Donnells and the Richard Murdochs and the Todd Aikens and Sharon Angles. But unless I'm wrong, all of those people were at least, state legislators, or maybe 1 or 2 might have been members of Congress. I mean, they had something on their resume that said they might be nuts. Their positions are wacky, but there's a there. What does Herschel, look, Herschel Walker has done 2 significant things in his life. He won a Heisman Trophy, and he handed the Dallas Cowboys 3 Super Bowl titles because Jerry Jones was able to fleece the Minnesota Vikings on that trade back in 1991, where Jura got 86 number 1 draft picks for a guy who I think ran for 3 yards for the Vikings or something. I don't know. That's it. And we can say the same thing about Oz. I mean, that is today's Republican Party, where it doesn't matter if you're qualified or not. So that's what this race says about the Republican Party, about Mitch McConnell, about several senators who went to campaign for Warnock. They just want to run the show. They don't have any idea what they're going to do once they get to running the show, but they want to be in charge. And I think that is a sad state of affairs when there are not people that say, you know what, I love my party, but this person has no business sitting in the well of the United States Senate. And I'm going to stop there because I think having grown up around the U.S. Senate with family, having worked to support the Senate, I have a love for the Senate that maybe, tilts my opinion and my feelings for that institution. But that man has no business sitting in the well of the United States Senate making speeches of any sort. None. Zero.
So
Zilch.
I saw Hamilton last week in Baltimore,
You
and
did.
you don't have to go any further than Hamilton to know that, the part where Aaron Burr changes parties and gets elected to the Senate from New York, that political parties and their members don't care about principles. They care about power. They care about expediency. And the same thing is true of Democrats versus, look at how many, I've said before on this podcast, look at how many Democrats we know are running to Liz Cheney. Oh, Liz Cheney's courageous. Oh, Liz Cheney's doing her job. To your point, if, I get up in the morning and I work my job for 8-9 hours a day or more, most likely, I don't have a whole bunch of people patting me on the back, praising me, saying, you're so courageous and humble and you're putting something bigger than you ahead of your own agenda, etc. No, because my agenda is to work to make money to pay my bills and maintain my lifestyle. And that's what Liz Cheney did. So we can't sit here and be these paragons of virtue and be members of a political party. The two simply are incongruous. So what is, of course, interesting, and by interesting, I mean horrifying, is the depths. Because I do believe, and this is where I do see commonality, is that I don't think I've ever seen a time this bad.
Yeah.
There have been ham and egger, celebrity, goof candidates, to your point, in the past. But we've never seen such a preponderance of them as we do in the current time. And Herschel Walker is endemic of that. May he lose, and may he lose badly. But he might not. And I think it's going to go badly for him because I see this doing nothing but spiraling. Plus, it doesn't seem like he has a team around him that's ready to fight back. First off, how are you going to hit a pastor on moral grounds, unless if Raphael Warnock has just done something so god awful? If he choked an injured dog to death on the street corner, a la Frank Underwood in the first episode of House of Cards.
Yeah.
And there's a film of it. How are they going to find anything to attack that man for on? I have no idea, especially given as early voting's already started there. And they have about, we're about 2 weeks away, a little more than 2 weeks away from the election. I don't see how Walker wins, but I also don't see how Walker, Oz, J.D. Vance in Ohio, some of these other plebeians, I don't see where this string of celebrity candidates is going to stop. And God help us for it.
Well, you're going to have more of them because you're right. It is a celebrity world that we live in. And even people who are non-athletes or TV personalities like your Marjorie Taylor Greenes and your Laura, there are just a lot of unqualified, unserious people out there. And one thing I will say for the Democratic Party, we might nominate some people or put some people up whose views are a little far out there, who are maybe a bit more liberal or moderate, depending on your view. But I can't think of anybody that Democrats have sent, certainly not on the national stage, that are just straight up unqualified for the job. There was a debate between Walker and Warnock, and Walker showed no sign that he's up to the job, that he's qualified for the job.
He pulled out his serial box badge.
Yeah, that's what he's been reduced to, is doing interviews talking about a police badge, and even how he addresses that is it's nuts. So that's one thing I will say. You're right. Democrats have thrown up their share of folks that we've both shaken our heads at, but not people who are just flat out dead bang. You are not qualified. Period. Hard stop. Politics and ideology aside, you're just not qualified for this job. And that is Herschel Walker. He is absolutely, positively not qualified to be a United States Senator. There is nothing, and it's not about football players, because he sure ran for office and won and was legit, and Steve Largent and some others. He's not legit. He's got nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
So let's talk about, and we'll save the best for last, but let's talk about, you talked about architects of the Republican Party. And, people tend to forget that one of the architects of the current Maryland Republican Party resides right here in little old Howard County. And in fact, while praising his father up and down for, saying hello to black people in the 60s and all the other mediocre things that Bob Kittleman did, because Bob Kittleman was a mediocre farmer, a mediocre state legislature, frankly, a mediocre human being. His son is son of mediocre. And, and there seems to be a lot of revisionist history about the Alan Kittleman 4 years term as county executive, which was not very distinguished, which was marked by a whole lot of, photo ops, a whole lot of sweeping problems under the rug, blaming the other guy. Why anybody thought that a moderately successful Republican state senator could become an effective chief executive of a couple $2 billion budget was beyond me. But yet, that's who people elected in 2014. And, now he's portraying himself as the guy who can fix it. So in the past few weeks, we have now seen the Howard County executive's race come to bear on local television. We've seen Larry Hogan do an ad for Alan Kittleman as being, for Alan's staunch leadership in the 2 floods in Ellicott City, forgetting to say that it was that quote unquote staunch leadership during those 2 floods are part of the reason why Alan got voted out of office, and that Alan is beyond politics. Not sure how he's beyond politics, because he was a minority leader in the Maryland Senate when he was a senator. So that's pretty much with politics, and how he stands up to people like Donald Trump. Never mind the fact that, Alan Kittleman was very much a supporter of the McCain-Palin ticket in 2008, of Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan in 2012. In 25 years of being active in local politics, I never remember Alan Kittleman ever being against a Republican candidate for governor or a Republican candidate nominee for president. So, and Alan Kittleman, of course, started his political career as the head of the Republican Central Committee. So he's been, here's another Hamilton thing, in the room where it happens the whole damn time. He's been the insider's insider the whole damn time. And, forget the proven independent leader moniker. He's jumping on Calvin Ball for his insider shenanigans. And my response to that is pot, meet kettle. Meanwhile, on the other side, Calvin Ball is going the everything sunny in Howard County route. You know, his first commercial has groups of Democratic activists doing the Miller Lite thing, saying, great schools, safe neighborhoods, great schools, safe neighborhoods. And then Calvin shows up in the middle and says, in Howard County, we have both. I mean,
I'm sorry.
what's going on here, Steve? I mean,
Bill,
as
I
a
ask
wise man once said, what's causing all this?
Bill, I gotta ask you a question before I comment. Did you? I know I did it, but did you play the how many of these citizens do I know and have seen at 58,000 events game? Because I'm like, yep, I know you, I know you, I know you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know exactly who. I mean, in both of them, all of their ads, I know who people are. And it's like, why? Why are you doing this?
And I guess this happens in other ads, and maybe just because we live in Howard and we know these people, but I'm just like, oh yeah, Mr. Ordinary Citizen. Yeah. Member of the Ordinary Citizen, member of the Central Committee. Look, I see you, bro. Yeah, anyway. Okay, lot to unpack there, Bill. First of all, as far as the ads, I've seen the Ball ad, I've seen the Kittleman ad, I've seen the John Sarbanes ad. The people behind all three of those ads need to call Katie Fry Hester's people because
thank
Katie
you.
Fry Hester's
Thank you for throwing both of those other ones in there, because that Sarbanes ad is god awful. I swear to Jesus, I'm going to run against John Sarbanes one day. He's so just nondescript, and he's just like a blank sheet of sheetrock. But yeah. Katie Fry Hester's ad rocks.
Yeah. So if you want to know who won the ad wars, Katie Fry Hester. Thank you very much.
Yes, Katie Fry Hester for governor in 26 or 2030, please.
Yeah, please, something. Anyway, I mean, Alan's ad is a, quite frankly, it's almost Willie Horton lightish, with the lady talking about how she's scared to send her kids to school. Calvin Ball looks like a bad talk show host, not even a talk show host, not even a good one. Just, we could have both here. I mean, it was like a chamber of commerce.
So, to quote the first episode of Homicide, is he Montel Williams? We want Phil Donahue, but we got Montel Williams. Is he Montel Williams?
Yeah, and mind you, I like both guys, but both of those ads were just bad. And Hogan touting the bipartisanship, but then an ad that is totally partisan, because he's like, well, but he's like, we're great when we're bipartisan, but okay, here's what's going on that's wrong with Howard County. So they're both bad. So anyway, as far as the race, I've been disappointed with the Kittleman campaign, because not only has it been a classic Republican campaign, it's been a classic, I'll call it Trump Cox Republican campaign, where it's been a lot of negative rhetoric, fear mongering. Like you said it perfectly. It's Howard County is going to the dogs, and I hate to use these words, I alone can fix it. It really has gone to that level with the campaign. I honestly, with some of the issues around the Ball campaign and the Ball administration, I think Kittleman 14 or even Kittleman 18 might have had a legit shot at this thing, but the 22 version is just so transparent, where he's trying to have it both ways. Here's a guy who's raised a lot of big money, but now he's this paragon of virtue, taking money from the CEF, a piece of legislation, by the way, that he vetoed. He's running as a classic Republican, trying to, quite frankly, use a little bit of the dog whistle stuff, but he recently has his thing at his farm. And who's there? Let's see, Governor Hogan, Lieutenant Governor Rutherford, former Lieutenant Governor, and GOP Chair Michael Steele. Who's not there? The top of his own ticket in Maryland, because even Alan Kittleman knows, I can't be seen next to Dan Cox or Jordana Schiffarelli. I think I'm probably pronouncing her name right, or whoever that clown is running for Attorney General. I can't be seen with them. They might have been there, and they just made sure that they were not in the photos that I saw. So it's this whole, I want to have it both ways nonsense. At least Dan Cox is leaning into who he is. He is a far right Trump flag waving kind of guy, and he's either going to win or lose that way. He's going to lose, but I can at least appreciate the fact that he's being honest about who he is and what we'd be getting. Whereas Kilman, I don't know who advised him or if he himself decided this was the campaign he was going to run. But if this is the last chapter of what has been a solid, maybe not spectacular career, but certainly you could point to some things in Alan Kilman's career where you said, he has served at least his section of the county, he has served them well over a number of years. If this is the last chapter, it's an awfully sad one. It really is.
I saw your face as I was talking before, and you were kind of like, "Damn, Bill." I mean, I like I've liked Alan Kittleman as a human being before. I mean, and part of me still does. And he and I have had some terrific conversations. But he's a punk in this campaign, and if this is how he let himself be, and if this is who he really is, then he's a punk. For all the reasons you just mentioned. Again, another Hamilton line, Mr. and I'll transpose names. Mr. Ball may have positions with which I profoundly disagree, but at least he has them, while Mr. Kittleman has none. And that's exactly where we are. And that gets back to all the talk about my dad. I mean, there are enough progressives, and looking at some of you there in the UU congregation in Columbia, who seem to lionize Bob Kittleman because Bob Kittleman was a UU, I guess, and because he did things with African Americans. And there are even notable African American politicians in Howard County who talk about Bob Kittleman's record as head of the local NAACP. Well, okay, I can't deny the fact that Bob Kittleman did those things, but I can deny the fact that Bob Kittleman did a damn bit of good. He didn't. He's a failure. And every step of the way in the legislature, all that man did for 20 years was vote and work against progress. So while he held a title, he also actively worked against the things that you care about. And when I say you people care about, I mean all progressives. So, you can't have it both ways. And, it's not Bob Kittleman who's running. Bob Kittleman died over, I think, 14 years ago. It's his son who's running.
All time, yeah.
And his son, while he says good things about LGBTQ people, while he says good things about bringing people together, he's been a flop in actually making it happen. And Calvin Ball has not had a wildly successful first 4 years. But the opposing side produces absolutely no compelling argument to your point that their turn would be any better over the next 4. And that's a shame. That is an absolute shame. And you're right. It's a crappy way to go out. But you know what? You can't deny who you are. You can't deny what you are. And I think maybe that things are finally catching up to Alan Kittleman. Who he is and what he created. He created the Dan Cox. He created Gordana Schiffarelli. He created Michael Perutka by not standing up for the rise of cultural conservatism. I mean, as a Republican activist, as a Republican elected official, he rode those people into office time and time and time again. And now they're taking power. And now he says, oh, no, I ain't part of that. You can't separate from it. So Alan Kittleman, phony. The only people phonier are these so-called progressives who are supporting him because of, Ball's problems. How do people say that they're running for the Democratic Central Committee and then they support a guy like Kittleman? I have no idea, but to each their own. I'm done on this. Just
Yeah, that's a
garbage.
whole other. Yeah, the whole progressive thing. That's a whole other one. I got a tweet from a pretty notable one about a pretty innocent tweet, and it was all about, well, what about, maybe Kittleman has this message on this one issue. I'm like, so that one issue is so important to you that nothing else matters. But I didn't
Well,
even
and
respond.
and
You're
in
right. There are those
reality,
people out there who are just
and any talk of Alan Kittleman's is just that talk.
right.
What did he do? What has he done? What will he do? And the answer there is nothing. It's time
Right.
to take that horse out back and shoot it. Bye Alan, bye Robin. Go off into retirement. Go back to the farm. Talk about what used to be. Have fun.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a bigger thing with Republican Party. My last point is Republicans and why voters who are not on one side or the other, maybe there aren't that many of them out there, don't get. Republicans are very good at campaigning based on what they're not. They suck at articulating a vision in terms of who they are and where they want to go. And Kittleman is a microcosm of that, because I still maintain that in 2014 he won because he was not Courtney Watson. And enough people were turned off by Watson that he got by. In 2018, Calvin Ball, for all that we've said about his past 4 years, came in with a vision for where do we go from here, and people bought into it. And now Kittleman is trying the what I'm not, and people are like, no, you got to give me more than that. And he, like a typical Republican these days, ain't got it. That's local, that's state, that is national. We talked about the Senate races. That is the Republican brand. We can tell you, what did Andy Shepard say in American President? We're good at they're good at two things: tell you what's wrong with your life and tell you who's blamed for it. But they suck at what can we do about it. They haven't been good at that since Reagan, and I don't know how good Reagan was at it. But they've not been good for 40 years at saying, here's what we're going to do about it. The only thing they can do is, here's the problem, and it's their fault. And that's the Kittleman campaign in a nutshell. It's the Republican brand today.
Yeah.
Now,
Steve, we only got a few more minutes left, but I do
Sorry.
want to hit upon one more topic, because while we're talking about architects of the Republican brand, I by no means wish this outcome for Alan Kittleman. He hasn't done anything to deserve it that I know of, but Steve Bannon is going to jail for contempt of Congress. He was sentenced to 4 months in jail the other day, fined $6,500. Now, in reality, it's been a long, long time since anybody has gone to jail for contempt of Congress. So will we see Mr. Bannon's gin-soaked face and his always snappy repertoire of 2 or 3 button-down shirts over each other with 3 black pens tucked between the buttons of the top shirt? Will we see that yet on the streets of Washington, D.C. and Paducah, Iowa, or Paducah, Kansas, wherever the hell Paducah is, for years to come? Or will we see him wearing the orange jumpsuit and dropping soap?
The perp walk, baby, the perp walk. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I mean, he's going to appeal. He's still out on the streets while pending the appeal. But what I would say is, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he only got 4 months. He got a small fine. He's going to, even if he ends up going to prison, he's going to do his time. He's going to come out and make even more money, talking smack on a podcast or whatever it is he does. It's about doing the right thing no matter what. It's about doing the law has to be the law, and contempt has a very light sentence. It is what you don't go away for 20 years for a contempt charge, or refusing to acknowledge a subpoena or whatever it was. You just don't. You go away for a few months, you pay a fine. But that needed to happen. The message needed to be sent. Just like I think Jan 6 committee did the right thing by throwing a subpoena at Trump. You can't spend a year and a half saying it's his fault and not try to get the guy in. And when he says no, which he said no, you don't go after him. And the DOJ should go after Trump and indict him. these things should happen. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you're going to waste a lot of money and nothing's ever going to happen to the guy because he's transparent, he's Teflon Don and all. That's irrelevant. These things have to happen if we're going to have laws in this country. When people blatantly violate them, you got to do what you got to do. So that's my only statement is how this turns out, I don't know. I mean, he's going to appeal the hell out of it. You can't say the Supreme Court will let him off the hook because, the judiciary has not been kind to Trump world lately. I mean, the only person Amy Coney Barrett just threw out a suit on the student loan forgiveness. Clarence Thomas, I think, threw out the one where Trump and the Mar-a-Lago documents, they were trying to do some things there. The only judge that seems to be down with Trump world is that, 32-year-old down in Florida. And I'm starting to think Trump has her in a porno film or something. I don't know.
Oh,
He's got something on her. He's got canon on something, but that seems to be the only judge that is like ruled in his favor in like 2 years. So, again, it needed to happen. The process needs to go through, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see where it ends up.
Yeah, my prediction is that Bannon serves absolutely 0 days in jail in actuality. And oh yes, these Trump judges are very happy to be able to apply conservative legal principles in many other cases. But, Steve, there's a very good reason why they're not doing Trump's bidding for them, because Trump's asking them to do things that are illegal.
True.
And so there is that. That is a thing that happens. And as to the 32-year-old in Florida, I'm going to walk back that comment you made a little bit, but I am going to say that it's fairly clear that a 32-year-old judge who would be no more than 5 years out of law school would not exactly be a qualified jurist, to your point about qualifications to serve in office, much less the federal bench.
Yeah. Yep.
So
absolutely, but and sadly though, there are, in terms of qualifications, there are a number of those that are out there. They have lifetime appointments, and thanks to Trump, we may be hearing from several of them for a long, long time. Hopefully, if nothing else, to your point, they at least won't do things illegal. Like you said, the Supreme Court seems to at least have something remotely resembling a line. You hope that there are more of those folks out there than there are the Judge Cannons. Of course, I mentioned Coney Barrett. The difference is, Cannon's in her early 30s. Coney Barrett is at least in her late 40s, and I think maybe knows her way around a law library. So
yeah, absolutely.
There's a difference there.
I would say so.
But it is what it is.
Well, Steve, and with that, we come to the end of another exciting podcast production. Any last words or final reflections or anything you want to mention quickly that we haven't even talked about?
Well, Bill, I don't know how if you have a subject matter for your next Ravens podcast, since I'm wearing my Ravens gear, but you got to do something on the state of wide receivers in Baltimore and why the Ravens keep, there are guys out there looking to be traded. The Cardinals, I think Hollywood Brown's going to be out for a few weeks. They get DeAndre Hopkins back. They trade for Robbie Anderson. What do the Ravens do? They signed Deshaun Jackson. It's just killing me. It's like, guys, there are people out there. DJ Moore, make a deal for DJ Moore. He's out there ready. He wants to be out of Carolina. Elijah Moore wants to be out of New York. And you signed Deshaun. I know you love your draft picks, DeCosta, but you got to get up off of some of them.
I don't understand. And then apparently Rashad Bateman's pissed off about the Deshaun Jackson signing. We signed the guy DeMarcus Robinson off at the beginning of the season. I mean, when do we bring Des Bryant back? I mean, when, for that matter, you mentioned a name, what's Steve Largent up to? I mean, he's probably about 70. but why not see if he's still got gas in the tank? Wes Welker, where's he at? He's only been retired for 4 or 5 years. He would be better than Michael Campanaro ever was in the slot for us. So
Are
I
we on
mean,
are we on a TO watch?
what's that?
Are we on a TO watch now?
I hope not. I hope not. But I actually thought that he would have come to Baltimore, but he actually wound up being the smarter person there because he was like, I ain't playing for Kyle Bowler, and he was right. So, we have yet to find our groove this season, but then again, the entire NFL is yet to find its groove. There's a lot of 3, 4, and 2-win teams, and I think there's only really who the Eagles and the Bills are riding high above everybody else. You could make a case to put Kansas City in there, but other than that, everybody is absolutely average, which is Roger Goodell's NFL. They'll keep it interesting through week 17.
Yeah, even if we have to watch god awful Amazon Prime games, although last Thursday's wasn't bad.
Last Thursday's wasn't bad, but on one of the Sirius channels, the NFL channel that I listened to, the afternoon drive show is quite good with a former Jets GM Pat Kerwin and a former quarterback named Jim Miller. And Kerwin's take is that the practice schedule and the way the offseason works now in the NFL, it's hard for line play to get cohesion. Which then winds up leading to this wide open form of football where not just do you have a lot of passing, it favors the passing offenses, but yet also the RPO based offenses like the Ravens, so something like the 2018, 2019 Ravens, with a lot of ground and pound, mixed with RPO. That's going to be harder to replicate simply because with the new practice rules, lines are together for less time. And then you add to that injuries, and that even hurts it more. So, when you look at a team like the Ravens and how come we're not as proficient running the ball, it's not all because of the talent of the players. It's not all because Marshall Yanda retired, and Ronnie Stanley's been hurt. It's been because these players have been around for less time. I think longer term, the answer is going to be more athletic lines. More trapping, more pulling, more, plays where everybody slant blocks and then an entire play goes student body left or right. And then, you run misdirection and various looks off of that. But yes, a big issue for another podcast in another milieu. But as for our humble effort, I believe we are completed today. And so
we are indeed.
We will be here next week. We may or may not have a guest. We're going to try. But for Steve, my name is Bill. You have been watching or listening to another edition of Forward Maryland. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.